Ephesians 4, our text is actually verse 2, but we'll begin at verse 1 so we can get a context, and we'll read down to verse 4 because that'll give us the concept. So verse 1, Ephesians 4, verse 1, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech ye that you walk worthy of the vocation wherewith ye are called. Vocation, that means a profession, your job, what you do. With all lowliness and meekness, with longsuffering, forbearing one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There's one body, one Spirit, even as you're called in one hope of your calling. All professions have this thing they call continued education. Don't you just love the sound of that? That means, yeah, you're qualified and you probably had to get a degree to get this job, but that's not enough. Every year you got to go learn some more. Well, that's a good thing. That means you're qualified for whatever new thing comes out. You're qualified to handle whatever life hands you. Well, the Bible's no different. The Bible's the real one. The world's continuing education is a mimic of what God set up. And God's got a continuing education, and you never get educated enough. Part of it is the real education that man doesn't want, and that's learning to be humble. God has themes that he does with people, and it seems like, I don't know, for the last year and a half, the theme with me is always seems to be when I go to the Bible is humility. That's the common denominator of Christianity, is humility. Submission to God, okay, you could submit without being humble, but humility means you're going to submit either way. So humility seems to be the common denominator, and it will be in this morning's message. One newspaper reporter says this, that he thought the continuing education program was bad for teachers because suddenly they would learn and be able to get a better paying job. Well, not so with God. God's continuing education isn't about your pay. It's about advancing his kingdom. It doesn't have anything to do with us. It's about being a wheel that can move and make something happen. In verse 2, he's laid out 4 things that are important to a man if he's going to be usable by God. 4 words, and we'll just follow these 4 words through the Bible and see what God says about them. The first one is lowliness. Lowliness. That's humbleness of mind. It's not the false humility you see amongst the world, but a true just humbleness before God in your mind, recognizing who you are. We start really thinking about it. In comparison to God, we know we're not worthy. That doesn't take a whole lot of thought. But once you can get in that train of thought, you suddenly are humble, whether you wanted to be or not. Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. He says, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem others better than themselves. Whew, that is not a popular verse. And you can see why. He says right there, what you really ought to be doing is thinking, hey, this next guy's better than me. Maybe I can learn something from him. Ouch. But we should. That's part of being a real Christian. Those are the things God teaches for us. Look at Psalm chapter 138. Psalm 138 in verse 6. Psalm 138, verse 6. Humility is rough. Being lowly is tough. However, it has a good payoff. Look at this. Though the Lord be high, yet hath he respect unto the lowly. But the proud he knoweth afar off. So if you're faking it, he knows that too. There's no hiding from him. Look at Proverbs 3. Proverbs 3, verse 34. I'll probably start moving faster than you can turn to scriptures, but because I've got a bunch this morning. Proverbs 3, verse 34, he says, Surely he scorneth the scorners. This is God. A scorner doesn't have any leg up on God. If he wants to be a scorner, God will give him right back what he's got, and probably 100-fold. He scorneth the scorners, but he giveth grace unto the lowly. So if you'll consider yourself lowly, if you will in your mind be lowly before God, then you get something out of it. Grace from God. And don't we all need some grace? Especially from God? Now, we need it from man too. You need some mercy and some grace from the people around you. But that doesn't mean anything in comparison to getting mercy from God. That's important. Look at chapter 16, verse 19. Proverbs 16, 19. Proverbs 16, 19. Better is it to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. It seems like the people who have all the goodies and the toys and all the money and all the stuff that the flesh tells you you want, they have another thing you don't really like, and that's pride. And even if they said, come join our party and we'll share with you, that's not going to be a happy party. He said, you're better off to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to be in the crowd that thinks they've got it all and they'll share with you. The fact of the matter is they don't have it all. God's got it all. And one day he's going to remake it so that it doesn't deteriorate, and then he's going to give it to me. That's the way things are going to really go. Isaiah chapter 57. Isaiah 57, verse 15. This is God talking about himself. I like these verses where God talks about himself. And you can, there's something unique. When God talks, you can hear it, and there's power and authority behind it that man doesn't have. Isaiah 57, 15. For thus saith the high and lofty one that inhabiteth eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place with him that is of a contrite and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble, and to revive the heart of the contrite ones. That's a good thing. You know, this life just wears you out. I mean, just doing the right thing wears you out. I'm not saying doing the wrong things, but doing the right things, this flesh, you just get wore out. You get wore down. He said, I'll revive those guys that have a humble spirit, contrite spirit. God will revive us. There's not any magical drink you can have. There's no protein drink shake you can get that'll revive you spiritually. But just having a humble spirit between you and God, God says, I'll give you the extra energy boost you need when you need it. And I've seen him do it. Zechariah chapter 9. Zechariah 9, verse 9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just, having salvation. Now this is the king coming. This is probably a reference to Armageddon and him setting up the millennial kingdom. But while he is a powerful king and he's going to wipe out all armies of the earth, here's the way he describes himself. Lowly and riding upon an ass, and upon a colt, the foal of an ass. Now he did do that the first time he came, but this is who he is in mind, lowly. Lowly. If Jesus Christ can be lowly, we sure had better be. So he's our pattern, and it's hard to force ourselves to condescend to the right pattern. I don't know why that is. I know why it is. Because the flesh says he's king. The flesh wants to be on the throne, and you can't compete. You can't put two thrones up. One's always going to be higher than the other. Either the flesh or the spirit. And you choose. In Matthew chapter 11, Matthew 11, verse 29, Jesus' own words describing himself. Matthew 11:29. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. That's quite a description of himself. This is God in the flesh. And he's saying, I'm meek and lowly in heart. Now that's a God you can serve, isn't it? Somebody who's patient and kind and gentle. That's what you want. But now notice the first part of it. He starts it with, take my yoke. You're going to serve me. And here's why you want to. I'm meek and lowly. You won't find anybody else that wants you to serve them that has this description. He's a good God to serve. In Acts chapter 20, Acts 20 verse 19. Here's Paul. This is missionary testimony. Acts 20 verse 19. Serving the Lord with all humility of mind. Wow. And with many tears and temptations which befell me by the lying in wait of the Jews, the religious folks. He says it took some humility of mind. It does. And it seems like there's always this balancing act. Well, you have to get information and education, so you learn things about the Bible, and that goes in your head. And once that goes in your head, the head just swells up. And when it does, it outweighs the heart. And then God has to smack you down so he can get that knowledge down in your heart. And the two have to balance each other out. But it seems like the more wise we get in biblical things, the more we become pompous. We shouldn't be. That shouldn't make us proud. It should do the opposite. It should make us humility of mind. In Colossians chapter 3. Colossians 3 verse 12. This is the improvement of the Ten Commandments. People think that the commandments and the laws and all that is Old Testament, and we don't do that anymore, and so now we have nothing to follow. We just do whatever we want to in the New Testament. Wrong. New Testament is full of rules. Here's some commands. In Colossians 3:12, he says, "Put on, therefore." No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You need to do it. "As the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercy, kindness, humbleness of mind." There it is again. Meekness, long-suffering. Now, those are internal commands. That's not like don't murder somebody, don't, commit adultery, don't do these big things that everybody can see. That's some of those things that you'll never accomplish. Always you'll be working on humbleness of mind. Always you'll have something to work on when it comes to meekness and long-suffering. Those are commands. And that's a continuing education program. God will do this. Hopefully he'll do this with us. As we go through our day tomorrow, he'll remind you of one of those points. Hey boy, you're not being very patient. How about some long-suffering? You say, oh yeah, okay, let's work on that. These commands, he'll remind you of them, and that's what he's continuing to educate you with. Now, education doesn't do a whole lot of good when it's just on paper, does it? You find these people who they have the degrees on the wall. They've passed all the courses, and they've got, you can ask them any question, they can answer it on paper. But when it comes to putting something together with their hands, building the thing they just designed, they don't have a clue. Okay, the two need to go together. They need to work together. That's us. We can read about humbleness of mind, but it doesn't do us any good until God gives us a reason to be humble in mind. And recognizing it is a whole nother story. All right, let's get off it before I start preaching. James chapter 3. James chapter 3, verse 15. James 3, verse 15. It says, "This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish." Whew. That's all. That's the best the world can offer you. Worldly wisdom, God calls it devilish. He's not pulling any punches, is he? "For where envy and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work." Okay, you've wore us out, now give us something positive. Okay, here it is, verse 17. "But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace." Whew. That's some heavy-duty learning. Now, we've got people who are all love and mercy and grace and peace, and, well, faking it as though they are. And they have no purity, no truth. They have no righteousness from God, from the Bible. All they want to be is, a Care Bear. They want to love on everybody and everything. No, you need a balance. You need to know what God says. Without righteousness, the rest of it doesn't do any good. But if all you have is doctrine and hardcore, what the truth is, and you don't have any of the mercy and the love, then you're imbalanced that direction. This is a tough thing, but it's being a true Christian. It's learning to walk and develop into the new creature Christ has designed us to be. Okay, that was the first thing we saw, was lowliness. The next thing on our list, he said, was meekness. Meekness. Now, what in the world is meekness? That's being gentle when being provoked. Oof. This is tough stuff. This is the advanced Christianity course right here. Being meek when you're provoked, that just goes against the grain of humanity. And especially if you know you're right. Still to be meek, that's tough. The Bible gives Moses credit for being the most meek man on the face of the earth. And you think about it, you understand why. He had probably 1 million to 2 million people in his congregation, and he didn't just meet with them once a week or twice a week. It was every day, 24/7. And they all brought him all their problems. And the bickering and the fighting. And he was picking up sticks the other day, and they shouldn't be doing that. I mean, really, that's what they were doing. And he could put up with it. And he was very patient with those people. And so God says, we're going to call that meekness. And that's good. Look at Numbers chapter 12. Here's God's title for Moses. Numbers 12, verse 3. Numbers 12:3. Now the man Moses was very meek above all men which were upon the face of the earth. Now, meek doesn't mean weak. He was not weak. He was not a wimp. You'll remember the time he came down off the mountain after getting the commandments, and he found out everybody, gone to creating a mini Egypt down there in the camp. Well, he said, we're going to draw a line in the sand right now, and those that don't get right, I'm going to give you a reason to meet your maker. And he did. So that's not weak, but God still called him meek. Now, the meekness is before God, not before man. That's what's important. Before God, are you meek? Are you humble? Are you submitted to him? Sometimes that'll mean, yes, I want you to be in submission to this other person. But sometimes it'll be, no, you're going to be in opposition of that other person because you're going to be submitted to me. It's just like marriage. Marriage has to have both parties committed to each other. And it has to decide that nobody else is going to be in the party. It's just a party of two. And both of them have to be committed. And if they're not, it doesn't work. Well, that's Christianity. We can't add the world as a partner. Our partnership is God, and that means we've already become prejudiced against anything else. We have to choose. But in God's opinion, that's being meek before him. In Psalm chapter 45, Psalm 45, verse 4. In thy majesty ride prosperously because of truth. Now with that we would say that works out, because he's final authority, he's truth, he's going to ride prosperously and he's going to put them all down. But what's the other side of it? And meekness and righteousness. And thy right hand shall teach thee what? Terrible things. Wow. Well, it would be terrible to anybody who's in opposition to God. Be bad news for them. But it's meekness before God. So there's two sides to every coin, they say. I don't know. I don't get many coins, but there are two sides to every coin. As far as man's opinion is concerned and the world, they're fighting the wrong enemy. They're fighting me, and it's not me they're going after. I'm not me. I'm property. Zephaniah chapter 2. Zephaniah 2, verse 3. Zephaniah 2, verse 3. Seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth. Imagine this. The preacher comes in and he says, okay, turn to God, but not all of you. I don't want all of you turning to God. We're going to define who needs to turn to God. All ye meek of the earth. Because it doesn't do you any good to turn to God and tell him he's got to submit to you. You need to be in submission to him first. That's the priority. All you meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment, seek righteousness, seek meekness. So for a Christian, that's a good thing to be seeking, to try to build in your own life, is meekness. You have to seek it. It may be, ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. Now, I'm not going into the doctrinal stage of that, but that's a fact. If you'll be meek before God, when the trouble strikes, he'll protect you. You get a special protection from God if you'll be meek. In Matthew 11:29, he says this, take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest to your souls. There's no rest in this world. This world will work you to just a nothing. You'll go to the grave still trying to earn that dollar that's on the carrot stick out there. I mean, really, you will. God says, I'll give you rest. There's nothing like going to sleep and actually getting rest. You know, a lot of people have sleep. They give you pills for that. But that doesn't give you rest. You can close your eyes and wake up and not have rested. God says, I'll give rest to your soul, the real deal. All right, I can't keep going through those. We don't have time. Maybe we'll finish this up tonight. Okay, we've made it through 2. Tonight we'll finish up the other 2, and I'll give you a conclusion. All right, you can just take that verse and take it home and ask God what it means. Each one of those words, you can just get you a concordance and run through, find out what God's definition of them are, and then start working on them.